to run the Shabbaton in February that Rabbi David comes down to.
Oh,
And
great. Okay, well, let's connect. Let's connect. I don't want. Thank you. That's great. All right, Sharon, I want to know how you are. Can you tell me for a second?
I'm okay. Yeah, I'm.
Yeah.
It's a process. It's a process.
Okay. I'm sure it's a process. Let me know if I can be helpful, if you want a distance visit.
Okay, I may be getting a non-distance visit from a PT. So they insisted on coming at 10 o'clock. So if I leave early, please forgive me.
Oh, you're forgiven. You're forgiven. Although I love your insights. Mark, were you trying to say something?
No, not at all.
Okay.
Just good morning. Hello.
Good morning. Hello.
Better, Sharon. Good to see everybody.
See you too.
Morning.
Okay. Asher Chaim, Shalom Ubracha, Shabbat Shalom. Miriam Rubin's here. Hey,
Good morning.
Oh my God. Hi, everybody. Great to see everyone. All right. I think we're going to actually wait 2 more minutes and then we will start. Just to give people a chance to come in. Justin, is there any way we could mute that bell so as we start, when people come in, we don't have to hear that? And everybody, this is Justin, and he's on our staff and helping us with the tech here, which I'm so grateful for.
Hey, Justin.
Yeah, I'm gonna try to work on it. Just
and everybody. Good morning, Roberta. Okay, there are other pages. Hi, Pearl.
Can we get the source sheet now?
Yes. Thank you for asking me. Greetings from Jay Bender. Hi, Jonathan. Thank you. That family is like some of our best friends. Wow. There's the source sheet. You should be able to, I set the setting so that anyone can access it. I'm going to screen share a PDF, but you can just, hook into that source sheet yourselves.
You put it in chat?
I did.
I don't see it.
You don't see it. Okay, I'm going to try. Oh, you know why? Because I sent it to the waiting room. The waiting room. Okay, now you see it?
Thank you.
It's the old doctor trick.
Alina, good morning. Good to see you, sort of, or see your name. Bob. Good morning to everybody who I know and who I don't know, and so nice to meet people, new faces. Good morning, David Kurtz. Hi, Ronnie.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom. Alina, I see your face. Miriam, I see your beautiful photograph. I see a lot of names. Karen, good morning. Rabbi Mira, so nice to have you here. Okay, all right, we're gonna begin. So Justin, if you can now mute everybody, except for the person who would like to lead us in the bracha for Torah study. Oh, good morning, Daniel, good to see you. I'm sorry I'm not saying good morning to everybody. I can't see everybody on the screen, so please, whatever. Please forgive me for that. Roberta Wall has a bracha. Roberta Wall, if you could unmute Roberta Wall, Justin, that would be lovely. It's going to lead us in the bracha for Torah study.
Okay, good morning. Yeah, it's an old Hasidic melody that I learned from Rabbi Natan Margalit.
Nice.
Okay, so it's to a nigun. So I'll hum the nigun, and then you can like hum the nigun along, and you probably know the words too. Yai da da, ya da da da, yai da da da, ya da 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 da. Galena behabita niflaot mitoratecha. Galena mehabita niflaot mitoratecha. Galena behabita niflaot mitoratecha. Galena miabita נפלאות מתורתך.
Amen va'amen. Is that gorgeous? Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kishanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Amen. Thank you, Roberta, for that beautiful, beautiful opening to our Torah study together. So today's parsha is Chaye Sarah, and it begins, it's almost ironically called Chaye Sarah, the life of Sarah, because it begins with the death of Sarah. But what I want to focus on today is not the death of Sarah, although that figures into the overall arc of our theme, but it's, I want to focus on Yitzchak, and I want to focus on Isaac Yitzchak because Isaac, after the Akedah, disappears from the scene. And he remains disappeared. He's actually kind of like the disappeared man. So Abraham goes with his lads and his donkey and Isaac to the Akedah. And on the way back, it explicitly says Abraham and the lads return, but not Isaac. And in fact, Isaac disappears from the scene for chapters. Good morning, Ben Pearlstein, our wonderful intern. Isaac disappears for chapters. So he's not there on the way back from the Akedah. He's not there when Abraham goes to grieve for Sarah, his own mother's death. He's not there when Abraham sends a servant to look for a wife for his son, right? He's noticeably absent in all kinds of places he should be. And in fact, he doesn't come back till chapter 24. So that's, and which is like one of the longest chapters in the whole Torah. After we spend, like sort of untold number of verses in the story of Abraham's servant, who the rabbis call Eliezer, and his story in finding his master's son a wife. Okay, so when Rebecca comes back from the land of Haran, right, which is the same place that Abraham hails from, or one of the places Abraham hails from, that's when Isaac reappears on the scene. And what does the Torah tell us? The Torah tells us that he comes from a place called Be'er Lachai Ro'i, the well of the living one who sees me. Which I think is no accident. And the Midrash tells us that he comes back from seeing Hagar, because that's her well. So what I want to do with you now is look back at the scene with Hagar and see, why would he have been at a place called Be'er Lachai Ro'i, the place of the well of the living one who sees me? And how does that figure into his, one could say, his resurrection? Okay, so that's the question on the table. We're going to look back at that scene with Hagar, and then we're going to go forward to the scene with the moment when Isaac comes back on the scene, and explore the connection between these two sources and look at some midrashim that connect them, and end with a poem, which I think highlights all the issues. Okay, ready to roll with me? So I'm going to screen share. You're all in terms of process here, you're all muted, and I think you all cannot use the chat, just so we can have one conversation, although I see some of you have put stuff in the chat, but let's try to have one conversation, because often there's like a whole other conversation going on in chat, and that can be distracting. And I'm going to stop for conversation, and we will unmute you so we can raise up your voices. Okay, so ready to share a screen. You can also, one more thing, if you want to access the source sheet by yourselves, the link is in the chat. But I'm going to share my screen. Here we go. Okay, does everyone see it? Okay, I just want to make sure that no one's trying to get in touch with me. Okay, we're good. Okay, hopefully people can see this. So first we're going to look at Genesis 16 for background, right? Background to the moment, as we just said, of Isaac coming back to life after the Akedah, after the binding. So can I have a reader in English? And then I will point out different things in the Hebrew when relevant. So if you could raise your hand, and Justin, if you could just call on one person, any person, since I can't see people now since I'm screen sharing. So raise your hand through Zoom. Don't just raise your hand, okay?
I have a Kaufman.
I have a Kaufman. Shabbat Shalom. You have been chosen.
Mute though. There we go. Okay.
Okay, I have just 1 second. Let me give people context here. So Avram, he's not yet Abraham, right? His name has not been changed yet to incorporate the Hey of God's name. At Sarai's behest, has gotten Hagar pregnant, right? Because Sarai wants a child and she'll do through surrogate if she needs to. But unfortunately, that story and that dynamic goes way wrong. And we could spend 3 sessions just on this text. And what happens is Sarai banishes her, right? And so we're going to look at Hagar and exile and what happens. Okay, go ahead. Iva, if you could read a couple of verses, and I'm going to say a few things about the Hebrew, and then we'll go forward.
Sure. And Sarai said to Abram, the wrong done me is your fault. I myself put my maid in your bosom. Now that she sees that she is pregnant, I am lowered in her esteem. The Lord decide between you and me.
So she told Avram to get her pregnant, to get Hagar pregnant, but now she's furious that Hagar is pregnant. And what seems to be going on is there's a dynamic. I'm just going to shut my phone off, which keeps pinging because the prayer team is communicating. So what happened was that Hagar seems to have seems to look down on Sarai because she's pregnant and Sarai can't get pregnant, right? So there's this interesting power dynamic between maidservant and mistress.
Right.
There's a lot to say about this, but we're not going to get into it. We're not going to get into those dynamics. But if you could read, did you read 6 already?
No, not yet.
Okay, read 6, please.
Abram said to Sarai, your maid is in your hands. Deal with her as you think right. Then Sarai treated her harshly, and she ran away from her.
Okay, so there's so much resonance here between the Jews, the Israelites being in Egypt, and this text. So here, an Egyptian is in a Hebrew family, and the Hebrew afflicts the Egyptian. So the word is v'te'aneha, right? Te'aneha, inui, affliction, is the same word that's used for what the Egyptians do to the Israelites in enslaving them. So that's fascinating. Alina, do you have your hand up? Did you want to say something? No, you just wanted to read? Is that what it was? We're okay. Okay. Okay, so we see this affliction leads to exile, right? And she runs away. Okay, go on.
An angel of the Lord found her by a spring of water in the wilderness. And the spring on you want to shift? And the spring on,
Good. Sorry, I missed it. Can you see it?
I can't see the next line on the screen, sorry. And the spring.
Oh, okay, that's because I'm looking at the Hebrew, I'm sorry, okay.
Right. And the spring on the road to Shur.
Okay, so where she runs to is a spring of water. So already that's, a sign of fertility, a sign of healing. So, we're already, even though she's running away and it's such a difficult and tragic story, here's a sign of hope, right? An angel of God and a spring of water. Okay, so let's see what the angel says to her.
And said Hagar, slave of Sarai, where have you come from? And where are you going? And she said, I'm running away from my mistress Sarai.
So this is so interesting. So let me just go back for the Hebrew for a second. Sorry, they're not matched up. So the angel says, the malach says, I'm sorry, wait.
Scroll down.
Oh, I see. So where are you coming from and where are you going, right? The sort of primal existential question, like where are you coming from? Where are you going? Where are you situated? And how does she answer? She only answers part of the question, right? She only answers, where are you coming from, right? She only says, I am coming from my mistress, my master, and I am running away from that master. So she only has part of the story, right? As a traumatized person does. They are just dealing with what happened in the past. They often cannot imagine a future or possibilities. Okay, so what does the angel tell her? Okay, so let's go to 9.
Okay. And the angel of the Lord said to her, go back to your mistress and submit to her harsh treatment.
Okay, so this is very mysterious, and we're not going to go into it because it's the subject of another, a different class. But she has to go back and be afflicted. Again, that word inui, that verb inui shows up. Okay, go on.
And the angel of the Lord said to her, I will greatly increase your offspring, and they shall be too many to count.
Okay, so I'm going to go back up to the Hebrew, and it says, your pray hinach harav yoledet ben, and you'll have a son. Oh, I'm sorry, I meant to go to 10, not 11. The angel tells her, sorry, I can't see the vowel. Harbe arbe et zarach. So your seed will be great, right? Will be great, a doubling of that word great. The lo yisaper merov, and you won't be able to count it, right? Now that's fascinating because not only is an angel of God speaking to a woman and telling her her seed will be multiplied, but it's completely resonant with Abraham's blessing. So here she is. She's an exile from the family, right? She seems like she has no future. She goes to the desert. She's by a fountain of water, and she finds a future, right? She finds a future. So in human terms, she's banished, rejected, exiled. But in divine terms, she finds a future, right? She has a future she can't even imagine. And as we just saw, she can't tell her story. She doesn't know how to tell her story except for the past. And here in verse 10, velosi yisaper, you can't count, you can't recount, you can't even imagine how big your story is, right? How beautiful is that, right? In a sense, it's the revival, the resurrection of Hagar. Okay, so now, and she's going to have a child whose name is Ishmael. Vikarat, you will name your child, your son, Ishmael, in verse 11, because God listened to your affliction, right? God heard you. Wow. Okay, so I'm going to skip and go to 13. So Iva, if you could just read 13 and then we'll look at it in the Hebrew.
Sure. And she called the Lord who spoke to her, you are Elroy, to which she meant, have I gone on seeing after he saw me?
Okay, so let's look at 13 in the Hebrew. So this is fascinating. Phyllis Tribble, the Christian theologian and literary scholar of the Bible, calls Hagar the first theologian, which I love, because she calls God's name, Tikra Shem Adonai Hadover Eleha, who is speaking to her, right? God, she's calling the name of God, who is speaking to her, Ata, you, such a direct, intimate conversation. You are El Roi, you are the seeing God. Why? Ki Amra, because she said, Hagam halom ra'iti acharei Roi, because I have gone on seeing after you saw me. So we know that there's a theme, an ongoing theme thread in the Bible that talks about, can I exist after God face to face? And she's saying, I survived this encounter, right? So in a sense, it brought her back to life. In another sense, it's dangerous. And then to continue in verse 14, Al ken kara le'be'er be'er lachai ro'i. And for this reason, the be'er, the well, the fountain, is called, actually it's a fountain, not a well. It's called the well of the living one who sees me, okay? And it's located, which I don't think that's so important. And I think we're done with this text. So this is the backdrop. This is the backdrop. This is the place, right, that Hagar names, that Isaac goes to after the Akedah. So now let me stop sharing for a moment, get your comments before we go forward to take a direct look at Isaac. Stop share. Okay, and Justin, we're going to take comments. So if people have, I'm going to ask for brief comments and as pointed as possible about this background, right? Background to our Parsha. And if you want to raise your hand, please do it in the chat, not in the chat, in Zoom. Daniel Berlin has his hand raised. Justin got him? I just asked you, go ahead,
There
Daniel.
we go. Sorry. Good
That's okay.
Shabbos.
Good
I'm pretty-
Shabbat. Good to see you.
Good to see you. I'm pretty sure that Hagar has the amazing honor of being the only figure in Torah who gives the divine a name. The only one who
That's interesting because we think about the 13 midot, right? So Moshe says, Adonai, Adonai, El Rachum V'Chanun, which is not, maybe you're right, because it's not exactly a name, right? It's a description of God's characteristics.
right, their qualities.
Yeah.
This is
Okay.
actually a
All
name.
right, I'll go with you on that one,
Yeah.
unless anyone else can think of a moment where a human being gives a name to the divine. I love that. That's amazing. Do you want to say anything else about that, Daniel? Okay, thank you. Excellent. Does anyone, before we go forward, does anyone else want to say something directly about that point and only that point? Alina. Okay, wait, we have to be unmuted. Alina Bloomgarden, Justin.
All right, so maybe other people have noticed this before, but you just said that in a sense, the entire story of Egypt is based on this karmic encounter here. Is that what you're really saying? Later, when we're enslaved, that was a connection you made that I hadn't heard before. So
Yes, I would say that there's a karmic connection here. That doesn't mean it's causal necessarily, but there's a karmic connection. And as the rabbis say, the actions of the ancestors are a sign for descendants. So we can definitely find here resonance with what happens later. So Lena,
a lot to think about in terms of our sense of, poor us, we were enslaved. Well, wait a minute. How are we looking at the other side? And
yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And in fact, the Ramban takes Sarah to task for how she treated Hagar. So it's definitely in our texts, in our tradition of commentary.
Right.
Okay, Mark Horn. Justin, you got him?
Here we go. I just wanted to, it's not a comment so much as a question. What does the words El Roy exactly mean?
God who sees me.
Okay. That's all I just wanted to know exactly those words. Thank you.
Yeah, the Er Lachai, living one who sees me.
Mhm.
Okay, Jonathan Perlman. Go ahead, Jonathan, you should be able to unmute.
Okay, yep. So I just wanted to point out that in Genesis 15:13, with the Brit Ben Abitarim, so Abraham's covenant, it already does foreshadow Egypt, and it used Inui.
Yeah, it does foreshadow Egypt, absolutely.
We're going to be a stranger in a strange land, and we'll be enslaved, and they will oppress us.
Yes.
So
So
this
the
comes
narrative
before.
of alienation is baked in from the beginning.
Right, so that's before this interaction with Hagar using Inui.
Yes. So this episode as part of the unfolding of that.
Exactly.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Before we even got there.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So Ben Pearlstein, Nehemiah, Alana, Asher Chaim. And then I think we're going to go forward because I'm sure we're going to have a lot of meaty comments here.
So just quickly to Alina's point about, or coming back to this Egypt karma, I'm aware, as we lift up Rabbi Jonathan Sachs's memory this week, I'm thinking a lot about his book that the name of the book is escaping me, but he does a lot of work with these later midrashim that basically explore the Arab and Muslim identity of Ishmael and his wives, whom we're going to see, are all sort of hanging out with Hagar in Be'er Lachai Ro'i, and sort of as a means for the rabbis to access sort of a more compassionate, and sympathetic attitude toward these characters who are otherwise sort of just, they're framed as sympathetic characters who, let's say, aren't chosen or who are driven out. And as we see, there's later karma with relation to the Israelites, but for the later rabbis who are living in the Islamic world, there's even more kind of a significance of their wanting to deepen that relationship with the people they see as the other through siblinghood.
Yeah.
Through this exact place and the reconciliation between Isaac and Ishmael at the end of the Parsha, and all of this kind of thing. Rabbi Dayan, maybe you want to touch on that.
So it feels like the place of Be'er Lachai Ro'i is the place for the other to go to and become human and gain a history and a blessing, right? And it's like, you think about American society and who is othered and where can they go to? Where can they go to for a sense of power and history and a story they can tell and possibility? Right. And her pregnancy is all about, right, her possibility. Thank you. That's really interesting. Okay. So, Nehemiah. Justin, you got him?
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks the Lord. Everyone stole everything I want to say. Thank you, Beth. And I just want to add that Agar, because she hit bottom and she was more humble, she became a prophetess before a mystic, before Sarai, because Sarai was still proud of and holding to the possession of. So the underdog sometimes have a better chance. And then she, of course, she became not just the mother of a great nation, but also the prophet in this nation. Muhammad, Rumi, Hafiz, you name them, so many, as great as our prophets. So it just confirms also what we say. Blessed are you, the Lord, who chose us with all nations, because they received blessings similar to ours.
Wonderful. Thank you, Nehemiah. Okay, so I think Alana and then Asher Chaim, and then I know other people have their hands raised, but I'm sorry, we have to, if we don't go on to text, we're not going to get to the point of today's session. Go ahead, Alana.
Shalom. I just am particularly struck and excited about this notion of Hagar as the first theologian. And one of the pieces of this that jumps out at me is that here she is met by God and she names God and she finds this holy well, but she leaves us with this question about, did I really see God? And it's so much, it seems to be like so much of the nature of our relationship with divinity. We have this experience of oneness and being met, and then it goes away and we're not really sure, did it really happen? And then,
I love that. It's like, did I go up, right? Yes, it's a question.
Yes.
Oh my God, am I going on seeing, did God really see me? Did this really happen? Love that.
And there's a kind of humility and wisdom in that, in immediately questioning or modeling that kind of humility, but also that's the nature of our relationship with divinity.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Yeah. It's interesting because like when people describe themselves as a mystic, it's like it's so tenuous, right? That connection, right? Does it happen? Does it happen implicitly? Does it happen explicitly? And if it happens explicitly, do we even believe in the reality of it?
Right.
Wow. Love that. Okay. Yeah, Alana.
Oh, just also the image of the well too, so when you draw from the well, you have to go underground. It's not necessarily bubbling up in the sky, that there's still a journey inward to draw from that well of living.
Beautiful, beautiful. Thank you. Asher Chaim, and then back to our text. And hopefully I'm going to get Justin, if you can remember who has their hands up now, we'll get to you, hopefully, if there's time before the end. Get Asher Chaim.
This story of Hagar at the well is it's just mind-blowing. I love it. It's a paradigm. What she needs from God is not for God to change the externals. She'll be told, go back and suffer, but she needs to be recognized and acknowledged. And some people use visual language. Some people use auditory language. Some people use kinesthetic language. Hagar gets all three. God has seen her, the child Yishmael, God really hears you, and she gets the water she needs to drink. So this nourishment from God is the nourishment for the soul that allows any of us potentially to go back and suffer because our suffering has a meaning. There's a goal at the end that's bigger than we are.
I love what you're saying. That's a multi-sensory experience. Like healing is demanding, right? We need so much from the world in order to go forward, depending on what has happened to us, right? Beautiful. Okay, going on to see where Isaac is. Sharing screen. Yeah. Okay, here we go. Okay, everybody. So I'm sorry. There's so much to say that the servant identifies Rebecca. She's the wonder at the well, we can call her, a vision of just action and generosity and strength and taking, like, lugging all these pitchers of well so the servant can drink and the camels can drink. And there's so much to say about that we're not going to say now. And the servant takes Rebecca and goes. So they go on a journey from Haran back to where Isaac is, which is in the Negev, and know that Rebecca repeats the journey that Abraham took. And one can say, even because she gets this amazing blessing about her descendants, one could call her the Abraham of her generation, right? So there's a lot of resonance there. So here we are in 62. I'm just going to read it now just to be a little bit more efficient for this moment. If we had all the time in the world, I'd love to hear you read, but whoever it is. Okay, so Isaac had just come back from the vicinity of Be'er L'chai Ro'i, for he had settled in the region of the Negev. Yitzchak ba mibo Be'er L'chai Ro'i v'hu yoshev Be'eretz HaNegev. Okay, so I think that's pretty straightforward. And Isaac went out walking in the field toward evening, and looking up, he saw camels approaching. So Rabbi David talked about this last night. Vayetze Yitzchak lasuach basadeh lifnot arav. So Isaac is doing something called lasuach basadeh, which is connected to the word. Actually, Rabbi Ingber connected it to two words last night. One is siach, conversation, and the other is a bush, right? A sichim, is that the right word? Okay, well, someone will help me with that later. Vayisa einav, and he picks up his eyes. Vayar v'hineg malim ba'im. Okay, so let's note what he's seeing. He's seeing camels come. Now let's see what Rebecca sees in verse 64. So he sees the animals. She sees the human being. She lifts up her eyes and she sees Yitzchak. And what does she do? and it's often translated as she gets off the camel, she alights from the camel. She actually falls off the camel. She falls off the camel. So what is going on here that she falls off the camel? So there's a lot to say about that. I believe Aviva Zornberg, the contemporary Israeli literary Bible scholar, says that she sees something about the difference between them and wonders, and I'm really paraphrasing, I may not be getting this right exactly, but wonders whether truth can survive in this marriage. And she falls off the camel in the shock of what she's, from the shock of what she sees. Vatomer el ha'eved, and she says to the servant, Mi ha'ish halazeh ha'holech basadeh. Who is this guy who's walking in the fields? And I think it's Asher Chaim who taught me that halazeh, who's this guy, is a negative kind of phrase, right? And there's some version of this that's used when Moses disappears, when he's up in the heavens with God, or up on the top of Sinai and receiving Torah. And the people, the Israelites say, where is this guy Moses? Where's this guy Moses? And the Eved said, and the servant says, yeah, this guy's my master. And what does she do? She veils herself. Now, you might think this is some kind of wedding ceremony, but I've investigated it. I could investigate further, but my sense is this has nothing to do with an ancient Near Eastern wedding ceremony. She veils herself for other reasons. This is all about vision. So perhaps she's veiling herself because she is sensitive to what Isaac can see and what Isaac can't see. So as many say, and as this is sort of reflected in the Midrash, after the Akedah, there's something about Isaac's capacity to see that is impaired, right? And we see that play out with Yaakov presenting himself as Esav and not recognizing his own child fully, right? So is she veiling herself out of a sense and a recognition that Isaac can't really take the full force of her personality, right? And awareness, for all of us, that intimacy requires often a kind of simsum. When do we present with the full force of our personalities? And when do we hold back? When do we veil? Perhaps in a good sense, perhaps in a negative sense. Perhaps that veiling at times means duplicity, as Rebecca becomes duplicitous, right? She doesn't present the full force of her personality saying, no, my son Yaakov must inherit. She's much more strategic than that, and she goes through subterranean channels. Okay, so what happens here? Vayisaper ha'eved litzchak et kol advarim asher asa. So the servant tells Isaac the whole story about Rebecca and him going to get Rebecca. And now let's look at this last verse, which is really important. 64. Vayevieha Yitzchak ha'ohala Sarah. And Isaac brings Rebecca into Sarah's tent. Sarah imo, ha'ohala Sarah imo. Vayikach et Rivka v'tehi lo liisha. And he takes Rivka, they sleep together, and she becomes his wife. And then here is the all-important word, vaye'eha veha. And Isaac loves her. This is the first time that the word love is used in the Torah between a man and a woman. V'yinachem Yitzchak acharei imo. And he is comforted, and Isaac is comforted after the death of his mother. So this represents the story of Isaac coming back to life. One more text, and then I will open things up. So this is fascinating. We're going to look at Abraham ibn Ezra, who says, quoting Rabbi Yehuda in the Midrash, when the knife at the Akedah touched Isaac's neck, his soul flew out of his body. He died. Isaac died. And when the heavenly voice emerged from between the kruvim, between the cherubim, and commanded, do not send your hand to hurt the youth, his soul returned to his body. In other words, the binding of Isaac is a tale of death and resurrection. And Isaac stood up on his feet and realized that so too would the dead be eventually resurrected, as he was resurrected. And he declared, Blessed are you, O God, who resurrects the dead. Ne'emana tala chayot meitim, baruch atah Adonai mechayeh hametim. So we read this, you are faithful to revive the dead. Blessed are you, God, who enlivens the dead. In the Amidah, every single day, right? We talk about God as a resurrecting force. Stop sharing. And so many of us have a problem with that. And I want to tell you a very brief story, and then I will open things up to those who have not yet spoken. So if you have spoken, please don't raise your hand because we won't have time for everyone. I'm very unfortunately, very brief story. Someone who I was friendly with in rabbinical school, I literally don't remember her name, but this conversation never left me. She told me about being a trauma survivor. And I'm not going to go into details, but she survived incredible trauma. And she told me that this bracha and this notion of God re-enlivening the dead was essential to her because she felt like she had been brought back to life from death. And I want to say to you that is, in my experience, a power of God, and an essential power of God is bringing us back to life. Okay, I've given you a lot. Oh my God, there's a lot here on the table, and I'd love to hear from those wwho haven't spoken yet. Emet and Ahava, you had your hands up before. I don't know if you still would like to speak. Emet and Ahava, you still have something to say?
Hi. Yes, thank you, Rabbi.
Yeah, good to see you. Mazel tov, mazel tov. Good to see you guys.
Things first, way back. I wanted, even though Kushner wrote when bad things happen to good people about his son, I can see where it was foreshadowed with Hagar saying, even though bad things are going to happen to you, I will still be with you. I will still, help you along, and I will make something great of you, even though bad things are going to happen to you.
Yes.
So I can see that. And then I also, like you were saying about trauma, then with Isaac, is being in Sarah's tent, it totally changes that narrative about, his mother and everything, to where, he can change that tragic death of her into something more meaningful.
Yes, beautiful, beautiful. Thank you so much. Okay, Ronnie Scharfman. Go ahead, unmute yourself.
It's so suggestive. I have so much to say, but first to go back to why do we learn that Yitzchak was coming back from Ba'er L'chai Roi? We had just learned that Sarai had died, and perhaps he went seeking comfort from Hagar, who in some sense is his stepmother, and Ishmael, who was his brother with whom he used to play. He's been so traumatized and he's so lonesome. We don't hear from him. We don't hear from him when he's on the altar. We don't know what trauma has shaken him up. So perhaps he's looking for comfort in those places, though that's his family. Abraham has disappeared for all intents and purposes as well, or at least God never speaks to him anymore. And not having found it, but perhaps having hoped that he would find it there, his heart is opened by finding this step family again, and maybe that way he can love Rivka when she appears. And it's interesting, since there's such a play of the gaze and who sees what and who sees whom. He doesn't see her yet in a certain way. She sees him, and the veiling, as you said, has many valences, if I can pun. But he can love her, and then perhaps after he loves her, which is substituting her for his mother because it's in his mother's tent, then maybe he can really see her. And he finds comfort. The word comfort is used.
So beautiful. And Ronnie, you said so much that I was meaning to say and forgot, so thank you. But it's so interesting how people who feel exiled either from society or families connect to each other and in that way find comfort and maybe a sense of power, right? Who do you connect with when the powers that be have somehow rejected you? Okay, so I see Joe, and then Jill, Nechama Rivka, Roberta Wall. And then I think we're going to probably have to close it down. I'm going to ask each one of you to make one point and make it really succinctly. That's the challenge right now, because we still have a poem to look at.
I have two comments, one question. The first comment is when I
asked for one comment, just one comment, one point.
Oh, okay. Well,
just choose one. Choose one. I'm sorry.
No problem. Well, I thought Isaac was super fine, and that's why she covered her face, because he was so gorgeous. But so that was my understanding. But then the question,
Joe, like, yes, for sure. Some people read this as she swooned, right? She sees him and she swoons and she covers. The text allows different readings, and it certainly allows for that beautiful romantic reading.
But I just had a question, because you made a point about the resurrection. Was there a scripture that I missed, because I'm missing the connection between the Isaac and his mom in a marriage, and then you speaking about a resurrection? So I'm a little confused.
Yeah, so I covered this in the introduction. You might not have been here, but Isaac disappears after the binding of his father. It completely disappears from the text. He doesn't go back with Abraham, his father, and the servants after the Akedah. He doesn't show up for his mother's death, and he doesn't go, he's nowhere on the scene when the servant goes to find Isaac a wife. So he disappears, and some people read that traditionally, right? Midrash, late Midrash, and forward, as him in a sense dying and then coming back to life. So it's not literal, but it's metaphorical. Okay, so now, Roberta Wall.
Okay, one point. Yeah, thank you for just starting a new inquiry into that part of the prayer of, raising the dead that I've also been a little allergic to. And what I just got is, it is celebrating the possibility of actually changing karma. Because death in Judaism could be the end of karma. Well, anyway, that's irrelevant. But that's what's happening. Maybe that's a way of re-embracing part of our tradition.
Yeah, interesting. And then I would further ask, what's the connection, if that's how you're seeing it, to the force of tshuva, to the force of repentance, which is another force with which we can shift the forces of karma. Okay. All right, Nechama Rivka. You should be unmuted. You should be able to unmute yourself. Nechama Rivka?
Are you saying Rahmana? Rahmana Rivka?
Sorry, I thought it was Nechama. I'm so sorry. Rahmana.
Ah, thank you.
Beautiful.
So because of my particular background with a Christian father, I was raised in the church and had to go through a lot of study for me of Yeshu's words in Aramaic from an Aramaic text that the regular church does not recognize. And the words for I am the resurrection in Aramaic are Inana Nuchama Wachai. And that word Nuchama is the same word as Nachamu. It's the comfort that Roberta and you spoke about. So that rendering it as resurrection is totally an overlay from a Greek-Roman agenda-based interpretation. But in terms of the oldest scripture that we have, that again the church is negating, is Inana Nuchama Wachai. The I that's connected with the I provides us with the comfort that allows us to change karma, allows us to come back, allows us to have the courage to do teshuvah, and then we can participate together in our collective resurrecting.
Wow, that's such an incredible connection. I'd love to look at the Aramaic. I'll go look for it, or email me with some connections, okay? Thank you so much.
To.
Beautiful,
Thank you.
beautiful, beautiful. Okay, oh God, there's so many people that want to speak and we don't have much time. We're gonna have two more minutes of speaking because I have to cut this off at 9:55 and I still want to read a poem. Okay, so Jill, I think I had said you were on the lineup. Jill, I don't see you now, but Justin, okay.
Can you just put the prayer that you're referring to that caused the trauma person to be healed? And can you put the verse for that in the chat, please?
Yes, I can.
Okay, that's it.
What you wanted to say, Jill? Okay, great. Elliot.
What strikes me here is that what brings Isaac back from the dead, and he disappears, and it's love that brings him back. It's not silver, it's not gold, it's love that brings him back. And for me, one way of looking at the veiling, when Rebecca veils her face, it resonates with, for me, with, God, needing, we can't see God. It's too much. It's too much. God has to hide God's face. The love is too strong. We can't take it all in, but it's love that brings Isaac back.
Beautiful.
In the same way that it's God's love that brings us back.
Thank you, Elliot. I love that. I love that. Okay, Elizabeth Richard. And then that's the last comment. I'm so sorry. And then we're gonna read one poem. Go ahead.
There we go. Simple comment. Yes, Isaac disappeared. What did he do? I mean, that's an open question. People respond to trauma in all sorts of different ways. Some of them might go on a search, whether it's a search for love, as was just said, or something else. It's a question perhaps of finding the capacity to live. And maybe he found that. So maybe when he did see Rebecca, he had to have the capacity for love, even though he hadn't found it yet until Rebecca came. Something had to happen between the Akedah and that meeting of Rebecca. And though it was done in an isolated way, he worked the land. He was not inactive. And then he found another human being. So some part of his soul must have developed in a nice way or retained the capacities that he found when Rebecca arrived on the camel.
Yeah,
it's interesting to think about what he went through in
yeah,
that period of absence.
Yes, and I think you're right that the natural surroundings, right? He's in the sadeh, in the field, is indicative. And as we've been saying, I think the Midrash is exactly wanting to answer that question. He went to Hagar to reconnect, right? To reconnect, as Ronnie was saying, to his family and perhaps to Ishmael as well. And maybe I forget who said it, to the multi-sensory experience, right? That you need to heal, right? In that place. Okay, so we're gonna end with this. I really wish I could study with all of you for the next 3 hours, and I had planned more texts, but we're here. So I'm gonna share the screen and let's see. Okay, so I found this poem and it was in my sort of investigating these themes, and it was so resonant with what we're studying today that I really wanted to share it with you. Roberta, since I see you on the screen, do you mind reading it? I'm going to ask you to unmute.
Okay. It is only by breaking open entirely, by allowing our heart and whole being to break open again and again, wider than we ever thought possible, that the unbreakable jewel is revealed, the belovedness of being itself, the radiant diamond that we have always been, by loving, truly loving every aspect of who we are. An inexplicable laughter is born from the deepest sorrow. An exquisite song emerges from the most terrifying scream. The most tender child is awakened. Through the hateful murderer, our purest holiness is revealed by our willingness to embrace the very thing that most frightens us, and we find unexpectedly the treasure where we least expect it to be, often in the most disavowed part of